Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. We are here with our monthly Skype interview with God's favorite atheist, Arabella Blum. How you doing?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Loving Michigan. Everybody pretty much knows I'm up here now, so that's fun.
Nice.
Today, I'm going to talk about something that most people probably won't agree with at first, but everything I'm going to say, I'm going to back up with facts.
Okay.
And it's going to be mostly about Black Lives Matters and the movement that is.
Okay.
So before we get into it, what do you think that Black Lives Matter stands for? What do you think the movement is?
I'll tell you. So for me, it was pretty clear. It was about, I think, all of these unarmed black men getting shot by cops, and then very little. I mean, I've done videos on this. Little to no repercussions for the police. Like very few have been prosecuted. It's like acquittal after acquittal after acquittal. So the point that is being made is why are our lives seem like they're less valuable, they're less important. So it's a point of saying, like when that woman was shot by cops in Minnesota because she was a white lady. Oh my God, all this stuff. Yeah. So all these, we've got to make all these changes. How could this happen? How could this happen? And yet when you see all this video footage, I mean, Philandro Castle, legal gun owner, hands up, tells the cop, I have a gun, here's my permit. Cop says, give me your ID, says, okay, reaches in, and then the cop shoots him, and that cop is still acquitted. So I think it's stuff like that where they're just like, we've been gunned down, and our lives aren't as valuable, and we're trying to say that, yes, they are. I also understand why. So if you're just a white person that's not really aware of the inequities, you're going to hear that and go, well, my lives matter too. That's, how can you say that? They're going to take that the wrong way. But, I've never been pulled over by the police for no reason. And then just about every black person I know has. And so that's where it comes from. Now, are there people within Black Lives Matter that are misusing that or using it for, we're going to go out and kill as many white cops as we can, and they're going to say Black Lives Matter, so then that taints the whole, any of the people that are peacefully just saying we want to just have our voices heard? Of course it is. That's the dilemma of any movement. Is you're gonna. Yeah. I mean, I always have a problem. Like I went down to a peace rally once, to protest the Iraq War in 2003, and I saw, some people wearing Che Guevara shirts, and I was so mad at that because he was. Anyone who shows that guy's face as part of peace, I'm like, well, he was he was part of Castro's oppressive regime. I even said to a person, I said, you should wear that in Little Havana in Miami and see how you're treated.
Right.
So
let's break down what you just went through.
All right.
Let's start with Castile. Now, I had to slow this video down a lot because that, for me, was the biggest one where I was like, well, we don't have an actual view of what's going on in the car, right? So we don't actually know for sure what happened there. So I slowed that video way down. I zoomed in, and I watched what happened. Now, the police officer already had the insurance card and his driver's license in his pocket, one thing that most people don't realize. And so, and he actually reaches into the car to try and stop Castile from doing something. Now, I want you to ask yourself, do you really think that a police officer is so unhinged that with a 4-year-old girl in the back seat, for no reason whatsoever, he shot him at point blank 6 times?
Yes.
I do not. I believe very much that he was reaching for a gun at this point. I didn't used to. My views on this have totally changed. And the same thing with vaccines, but that'll be another thing.
Well, let me say this. I'll give you a personal why I think cops have been over-militarized, and also because everyone in America has a gun, I can also see the police officer's point of view of I'm terrified because everyone could potentially shoot me. But and I think I talked about this in a video one time. I jaywalked in North Hollywood to go see a play, and a cop pulled around, got out of his squad car, came up to me, had his hand on his piece, and was like amped up, ready to go, like I just ran out of a bank with a bag of money.
So why isn't that racist? Why is it only racist when it's black people that it happens to? That happens to you too.
Well, my point is,
I'm willing to talk about police brutality as a conversation, but what I'm not willing to do is to draw the lines of race. I'm not willing to divide people into groups and say this group gets it more than this group. I'm willing to have a conversation about the police as a whole having a problem with police brutality. But when you start to divide them by race, what you're actually doing is you're creating racism there. And we are all people.
Yeah.
We are
okay.
all. And police kill white people at 2 times the rate. For every 5 videos you can show me of a black person being killed, I can show you 10 of a white person being killed. So I'm not going to argue that there is not a problem within the police department. But what I will argue is that when you're going into violent situations in heavily violent areas, you're going to be more aware of that violence. When you're walking into these inner cities, mostly called by, like, usually how police end up in these inner cities are they're called by other black people because black people are committing crimes in those cities. So they're usually, it could be white people too. It's just that the number of white people that live in the same cities is very small. So, I mean, this happens to white people too. When you're in those cities, a white man can get shot just like a black man. The question is where's the violence coming from? What is the real number of police that shoot black men in their community or black people in general? And I'll give it to you. It's 0.007. The number of black people who murder each other, 53.2%. So my argument isn't that the police don't need to be held accountable. My argument is that if you are really concerned with the black lives within those communities, then we need to start to change the communities because the violence is rampant in these communities and they're killing each other at a much higher rate than anyone else.
Well,
and unfortunately, no one's willing to have this conversation. No one's willing to look. I believe very much that Black Lives Matter. So let's deal with the real problems. Let's focus.
Okay, yeah, those are all legitimate statistics. Obviously, more white people are going to get shot because white people occupy, 40% of the population, where black people occupy about 13% of the population.
If you include Hispanics, it's 77% for white people. I mean, if you include Hispanics within white people, it's 77% of the population is considered white. But my question to you would then be, if that is the case, so why are specifically black men? I think it's a 52%. Here we go. 57.5% of all murders are done by 13% of the population.
Right. So let's go back into to all of that initially. So my point in bringing up the cop that was was overreacting to me for jaywalking was to your initial question was it didn't make sense to you as to why this cop would overreact to Philando Castle. My point is cops overreact. Here's a guy overreacting to me, and the statistics that you just brought up explain to me the racism within police, because they have these statistics.
Is it racism, or is it just realizing that you're going into a more violent place, though? Is it just realizing that in this neighborhood over here, you're less likely to be shot at just for being a cop than you are in this neighborhood over here? I would also make the point that resisting arrest plays a big role in what we see happen, like with Michael Brown.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hold on. The thing about that, though, so yes, that's true. They're going into a neighborhood. They know this neighborhood is more dangerous, so they're going to be more amped up, ready to go. But then this cop was amped up and ready to go with me in North Hollywood outside of a theater. So, so then they're going into a neighborhood, and okay, this neighborhood is more dangerous, but you cannot tell me that a white police officer isn't going to be well, if I see a black male in this neighborhood, I'm going to assume he's going to be violent. And so I already have that in my head. So if I already have that in my head, he can have statistics to back that up. And those statistics might be fairly accurate. You're still not going on a case-by-case basis.
You can't do that, though. Not as a police officer. Not going into a situation. I got done today. I watched so many videos of police just casually walking up to cars being shot, just casually in traffic stops in areas that aren't savory, where they kind of let their guard down a bit. What we're not looking at is, I think it was 16 cases in 2016 where black men were shot that were unarmed. But what people forget is when there are two people in that situation, when one of them is armed, both of them are armed. Because at any point, that cop faces the reality that more than likely his gun is going to be taken away from him. So more than likely, that's what's in their mind as they're going in and they're dealing with these situations. They never know when that's going to happen. It happens so suddenly, so quickly, that they never know who to treat which way. So they have to treat everybody the same way. They have to be equal about it.
Sure, but I don't think they are. I think they're going in and to say then the cop is being equal and fair. I just don't buy it, because there's just too much racism in this country.
I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying it's not racist. It's just, I think it's more to do with the violence, because in those same neighborhoods, white men are treated the same way. The ones that have their backwards hat and their big hoodies and their jeans, they're treated the exact same way. It's the neighborhoods.
Sure. Yeah, there's bad neighborhoods that are predominantly white, and there's white gang, there's white people causing problems and dealing drugs and being violent. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But to go back to the issue of people shouldn't resist, well, you're telling me that if a cop just kicks in your door right now, puts a gun in your face, that you're going to suddenly react logically? You're not going to be scared and maybe just go, what the fuck? I thought about running. When this cop pulled me over, I was like terrified. And in my this human need of fight or flight, I thought about maybe I should just fucking run. It's not logical. It's not smart. But I thought about just running because I was fucking terrified. And now if this is happening to me on a daily or even just a weekly or a monthly basis, and I go, excuse me, and like I even gave the cop a little bit of an attitude. He didn't shove me up against a wall because I'm a white guy. He didn't say,
well, let's deal with the neighborhoods. Let's deal with the problem that makes them scared in the first place. Let's deal with the reason that they have to be so afraid. Instead of just automatically, because let's say we reform police. Let's say we get exactly what we want, right? And we reform police and they get diversity training and all of that. How is that really going to change the communities? If they're still violent, if they're still killing each other and they're not graduating high school and they're not taking life seriously in a lot of cases, they're not doing the things that could get them out of these ghettos and out of this violence.
Wow.
How are reforming the police officers going to change that? Because then the cops are just reformed and they're not going to be as quick to Leo. Sorry. Well, they're not going to be as quick to pull their gun, but that doesn't mean that the crime rate is going to go down. That doesn't mean the violence is going to go down. We have to focus more on why they're like that.
It depends on what type of police reform you're talking about. If you're talking about community policing, one of the things they've seen in places that have done community policing is, guess what? The crime rates went down. There was a neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles where they started a youth football league that was run by LAPD, and the number of murders, and they started to interact with the neighborhood instead of this, and it was started by this married couple, both cops, white guy, black woman. Black woman grew up in the neighborhood. This guy grew up being a cop. Basically, he'd been a cop since he was like 18 or something like that. So they came up with this plan. This was on Bryant Gumbel's sports show on HBO. I saw this like a year or two ago. And so they started doing a version of community policing. They got the community involved in the game, in the coaching, in the referees, and everything around that. And in so doing, they were doing community policing, which is, hey, what's going on? This kid's in trouble. Where's this kid's dad? What's going on? The murder rate dropped, and there was almost like the murders that did happen, they got solved. The year prior, they had something like 23 unsolved murders.
Right.
The next year, they had 4 total murders, and 3 of them were solved because the people in the community were willing to talk to the cops. When you come in just with militarized cops into a neighborhood where there are not many opportunities, you do not have college, you do not have, it's too simplistic to say, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have the same opportunities. I was born middle class.
What opportunities don't they have that we do?
I'll tell you right now. So I'm big brother to a kid that lives in that was living in South Central, and I go into his neighborhood, and I don't, and first of all, there's very few that there's a high dropout rate in the school. A friend of mine teaches in Watts, and he's like, Graham, these kids are just passed along. They're not getting a real education. So they're starting out by like the 4th or 5th grade. It's like nobody gives a shit about you. You have no hope. Your high school diploma means nothing. You can't afford college. College is like the only way to get a college degree in that environment is like either you're like the straight A student, so the like 1% of the kids that are that they're just born not very knowledgeable and they're just gifted, and it's like, okay, and then athletes. So everybody else is not even given any type of opportunity, and then so that's generational. So then you have parents that aren't around, parents that aren't involved, and then you have a system that doesn't care.
Whose fault is that?
Well, that's the system's fault. But
right, elected officials, right? The elected officials. Who are the elected officials elected by? The community. So they need to be electing people that care more about their education, that care more about their schools, that are willing to go that extra mile. The elected officials are the ones who control that. They elect the people in their cities. So they have to start to elect people that give a crap, basically, about exactly what you're talking about. I would agree that the schools are crap. But what I would also say is that plenty of lawyers and doctors and mayors and even astronauts have come out of those very school systems. So, but then
there's that. But there's that. There's 1% that get out, that break through, and then
so is that number
out of that though? But to put it all on the voters, so then Trump is all of our fault. So by your logic, then the reason why we have Trump and our system is so sucked is, well, your neighborhood didn't vote enough for it, and my neighborhood didn't. We sat by and we let this happen.
Yes.
Well, sure.
We did sit by and let it happen. We let it happen year after year when we kept putting shitty politicians at the head of our country. We kept voting them in. So yes, it is 100% our fault because we live in a democracy. We live in a time and a place where we get to choose who our leaders are. So if we keep putting in people who only care about money and only care about looking good, and they don't really care about what's going on within our communities, then it most certainly plays a big factor in the kind of education you're going to get, and the kind of housing you're going to get, and the kind of laws you're going to get. That most definitely plays a huge role in what kind of society we're forming.
Well, yeah, but then that's true of any poor community, like all these poor white communities that vote red
Absolutely.
all the time, they're voting against their own best interest. But then you could make the same argument. They're not given the, if you in rural West Virginia or whatever, like it's the same situation. It's the same socioeconomics. Right. So then if there's not money put it in there, the officials don't care about you, you're not given a good education, how can you even educate yourself to realize that your situation is so screwed by a system that is designed to make you not want to vote?
I would say to that, let's talk about a group of people that were more oppressed than I would say even the black people were the Jews. Mm-hmm. Now, the Jews had the Holocaust happen to them. They're thriving. Mm-hmm. But when we sit there and we put black people to a different standard, that is where the racism is. What I hear when I hear people say, but they can't get educations, and they can't do this, and they can't do that, so we have to help them. We have to do it for them. What I'm actually hearing is they're not as good as we are. They're not equal. They're not one of us. They're different. We divide them out of our group, and we put them into another group that needs to be coddled and held, like their hands need to be held, We need to help this group of people. And to me, that is more racist than just saying, let's change the communities. Let's let the people within the communities form their communities, because
Right. Well, I'll just say this. I wasn't saying we need to help them. I was addressing your issue of why do they not have the same, why can't they get the same education that I can? I went to, and my high school was a well-funded, my high school was 40% minority. We had every opportunity possible, and you could do anything you want. You had every opportunity possible. Were there kids in that school, black, white, Latino, that screwed up and didn't take advantage of it? Absolutely. I've seen plenty of wealthy white suburban kids who have been handed everything and they still fuck it up. Well, that we'll never know, and that has nothing to do with race. That's just the human condition. But I can also see, when I see what is happening in South Central, I'm like, these kids don't have the opportunities, and now the system is so broken. You can't live on minimum wage. The healthcare, you can't even afford that. You can't save money. You're just going from paycheck to paycheck. As I've talked about, as Jimmy Dore has talked about, 60% of this country can't handle like a $500 to $1,000 emergency. And then you're telling these people, oh, don't be criminals when the easiest opportunity is crime. Could they choose a better life? Yes, but I understand the enticement of that. I got into trouble. I broke into homes when I was 14. And the thing is, though, had I been arrested, I was given a pass. That's the other thing, too. When a white kid is busted for weed, he's given a slap on the wrist. When a black kid's busted for weed, he's 3 times more likely to go to jail. That is an inherently racist system that is stacked against a certain group of people. And to talk about, to bring
how many, I would like to, for that, I would love the numbers on that, because I've heard that argument a lot. And what I would say to that is, let's go with black people. How many black people are actually in prison for that reason? For a nonviolent drug offense? The number is incredibly low. Mm-hmm. Incredibly low.
Because the system is designed because they don't connect. That's the other thing. If someone of low income, of any ethnicity, of low income gets arrested for a minor offense, they are always plea bargaining, which means they're saying I'm guilty, and now they're in the system, and that you are screwed.
But I like what you just said there, because you took race out of it. It happens to all of us. We need to fix the system. My whole point of all of this is that race should not be a factor in it.
But it is. You can't be I would be great if it wasn't Arabella, and maybe this is where you and I just don't agree.
Yeah.
But
a little nervous about this interview, because I kind of knew that it was going to be one of those things where people were like, well, she's got to be racist, which I've gotten quite a bit lately. But the truth is I'm not racist. I really just want to fix the problems. I want things to get better, and I don't believe that they're ever going to get better unless people start taking personal accountability for themselves and their own actions. Yes, is it true that they deal drugs? Absolutely. That is the easier route. But that is a personal choice that they're making. Is it true that they make the personal choice to carry a weapon? They make the personal choice to shoot someone. You can't say, I'm poor, therefore I'm not responsible. Or I don't have a good education, therefore I'm not responsible. Like, because that's what a lot of, not you necessarily, but a lot of people make.
But for me personally, I'm not making those quick generalizations. I'm giving you reasons and explanations to show the inequities. Because here's the other thing too, and you look at the media and you look at the NRA. How come the NRA didn't get back behind Philandro Castile? He was a legal gun owner. If he would have been a white guy, the NRA would have got behind him. The NRA is so quiet when a black person is a legal gun owner. They're always really quiet about that, because at its core, the NRA doesn't want black people to have guns. I mean, I don't like or support the NRA.
Okay, well, for Castilla, okay, then I will give you the guys, I forget their names, but they took over the wildlife reservation, the white conservative males, took over the NRA, didn't get behind them either.
Right, and they weren't called terrorists, or the media covered them as like, oh, they're, especially the Fox, and was calling them like, well, they have a right to fight for their rights, and this is what you get to do as America. So Black Lives Matter then, whole, blocks of street, and they're the crybaby black people that should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I'm not saying you said those things, but that's the thing, that the inequities. I think to achieve what you would like to achieve, which is to change the system, which I agree the system should change, but you cannot. America is a very racist country. It was born out of racism, and we need to sit and address that. It also was born out of money. We need to sit and talk. The economics are a big part of this. One thing is for certain. If you're rich, you have an advantage. I don't care what your ethnicity is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You have an advantage. And if you're poor, I don't care what your ethnicity is, you have a disadvantage. But I think you can't just use race as the only excuse, but you have to figure it into everything. You have to figure it into everything, because you can't say that it isn't there. You can't say that didn't influence a lot of police officers.
I'm not saying that it isn't there in certain cases. I'm not going to say all, because as soon as you start saying all of something, then you've defeated your own argument, because then you just need one case example to prove yourself wrong. So I'll never say all.
No,
but what I will say is, if we want to talk about privilege, who's really privileged in this country? Let's go with the Asians. The Asians, they make the most. They're the smartest, IQ-wise. They have really come into our country, and they have really built up a life for themselves here. They make a lot more money than most white people do. Now, when you go to the SATs, black people, this is something I consider to be racist, get an automatic 230 points on their SATs. Asian people get deducted 50 points. That is absolutely racist. We should be equal. Everybody should have the exact same playing ground. No one should get any more or any less than anyone else based on the color of their skin. And that's what we see. I mean, an Asian person in the exact same neighborhood gets docked 60 points, then a black person gets 230 points. Now, that's a study from Princeton. So when you want to talk about privilege, I go to those darn Asians, and I'm like, they're more privileged than white people. And white people, we're not as privileged as people try to make us out to be. Because as a white person, I'm told that I can't talk about this subject. Because somehow inherently, because I'm white, I'm automatically racist if I talk about any other group. And there's, without any evidence of that, without any of my actions ever showing that, and that is the very definition of racism, is to judge a person solely based on the color of their skin.
Right, and I think the SAT thing, I don't know enough. I don't have enough information on that to comment on it. So if that's accurate, then that's wrong. But I mean, I've heard people make arguments that the SATs are inherently racist because they're geared for like white upper middle class. Some of the questions are geared for that. So I've heard arguments.
I suggest you look at the Princeton study I saw.
Okay.
And I'll send you a link to it. The first thing that we have to do before we even get to the SATs is get people to the SATs. We have to get them taking the SATs. We need people to stop dropping out of high school before they even get a chance.
But again, this goes back to the whole education system needs to be completely revamped, because the education system was set up 100 years ago to train everybody to be shift workers in factories. The education system doesn't. It's designed to make you an employee and a worker. It's really they've done studies. Only like 25-30% of the people actually can learn in that environment. So we need to redo the education system for starters, because
which goes to voting. You have to vote in representatives and people who are going to have your best interest at heart. And when you are in a community...
How do you do that when you're only allowed to vote on a work day for 13 hours and you are also shunned it when, like, the Democratic Party blocked 26 million independents from voting in their primary because the system is designed to keep people out? So how do you change that system?
That's more national than it is local. We see that in more national elections than we do in local elections. Local elections are a totally different ballgame than national elections. Local politicians have far less corruption than national politicians do. So I would say to that, find a true progressive. not a regressive, because that's what I'm noticing is a lot of people are regressives. They keep wanting to go to the past. They keep wanting to be linear. They're bringing up stuff like slavery, which we abolished 150 years ago. They bring up the civil rights movement, which changed our country completely. They keep going to the past instead of focusing on what's happening in the here and the now, how our country is right now and what's going on right now. Do I think that it's going to be an easy road? No. It's going to be challenging. We're going to have to find a way to have a better voting system. But the only way to do that is to deal with the actual problems and to stop looking to the left and looking to the right and like looking everywhere else and saying, this is the problem, that's the problem. Our ultimate problem in all of this is our government officials. They're not taking care of these neighborhoods. They're not taking care of the school systems. They're not taking care of the water systems. Our infrastructure is falling apart. We are in one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest country of all time, I've heard. So why are these still problems? Like why is it a racist thing and not a political thing? Why isn't it that?
Well, it's easy to, if everybody's divided by race and religion and political party, then they won't get together and realize that the 1% is screwing them.
So we need to pull together. We need to stop with these, I'm a black guy, you're a white guy. We need to stop with that. And we just need to accept we're humans and there are problems. And we can only deal with these problems if we stop dividing each other. Because the more we divide each other, the less likely we are to succeed in anything.
But we need to talk about him. There's a book. It was written by an NFL player, and I'm blanking on his name. And I saw an interview with him, and but in his interview, he goes, first of all, if we want to deal with racism, he's a black man. He said everyone needs to look in the mirror and say, I'm a little bit racist about stuff. We all need to admit that we all might have a little bit of racism inside of us. And then when we admit that, we can sit down and start talking and get through these stereotypes. Because I understand there's a lot of stereotypes that get thrown around that are damaging, like white privilege. So if you're fourth generation coal miner and you live in a poor town and it's all white and there's an Oxycontin epidemic, an opioid epidemic, and people are in jail for guns and drugs and the cops are hassling you, and then someone tells you you have white privilege, I can see that person getting pretty pissed off. I understand white privilege. I'm a middle class straight white guy. I've enjoyed it, So I've seen it happen. I walk
It's not white privilege though. It's middle class privilege, because black people in the same class are usually, even if they're pulled over at a higher rate, if they're looked at, they're not arrested.
But still,
they don't go to jail
for the color of your skin is racism. I know people that have.
It's judgy. It is judgy. For sure. It's judgy. It's assuming something about a person based on the color. So yes, it is somewhat racist to assume that. But let's ask, instead of just saying, yes, that's racist, let's ask why the police think like that. Why are they doing this? Why are they so convinced that that person, because of the color of their skin, is automatically going to be, let's say, an easy ticket or an easy arrest? It's because ultimately Black people in general commit way more crimes than any other group.
Sure.
That's just true. So they're going to assume that. So we need to change that part of it. We need to stop giving them a reason to feel that way.
But then by that token, here's the problem. So most pedophiles work near or with kids. So then we should just be arresting every grade school teacher based on your logic, what you just said. Oh, so we should arrest every Little League coach, every woman that works with grade school kids, because I'm telling you, a friend of mine who's a cop, and he's worked in this department, and it's really gnarly. And he's like, when the Jerry Sandusky thing happened, he said, of course he did. That's why this guy runs this foundation to help disadvantaged kids, because he knows the disadvantaged kids will be easier to molest because they don't have a good family structure.
I'm definitely weary.
Right.
I would definitely look at that guy more. For sure. I would look at anyone who wants to work with children harder. I really would. I would be like, what are your intentions?
Sure, of course. But then wouldn't you be bad if it like I just want to coach youth sports because I like sports and I never had kids of my own and that's what I want to do. So then I'm looked at every time. I'm pulled over. I'm searched. I'm thrown up against a wall. Is that okay? If you fit some profile of a higher crime committing, your demographic and your was fit a profile. Okay, logically you could say, oh, I guess they should look at me. I fit the profile. But would you like that on a daily basis? You look like a prostitute, Arabella.
On a daily basis, no, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you should.
Okay, but I think if
it wouldn't be.
You were being accosted for being you fit the profile of a prostitute. Would you like to be treated like that on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or get pulled over more because of that? Anytime you're walking down the street, someone's like, "Hey, what are you doing out here? What are you tricking? What are you doing?" Wouldn't that after a while get to you?
If I was standing on a corner with boots onto my knees and a short skirt on and a belly shirt on every single day, yeah, I would probably expect to be accosted. I wasn't a prostitute. I would expect that because I'm wearing that costume. Mm-hmm. So automatically people are probably more than just the police would assume I'm a prostitute at that point. I'm not saying that this is right at all. What I'm saying is that we need to take the steps to change that. We need to be able to admit, like, okay, let's go with something that's other than drug related, right? Right now in America, and Black America especially, which breaks my heart for the Black women when I read this statistic. Black women are raped at a rate of 38.5%. Black men are suspects of that rape 50.8% of that time, and they're arrested 44% of the time. White women are raped at a percentage of 19.9%. The suspect of white men in rapes is 10.3%. Because ultimately, and here's the graph, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There's the graph. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, what that's telling me is that Black men rape more. Way more. Now, does that mean that every Black man needs to be looked at as a rapist? No. But what I'm showing is that they commit more crimes. We need to bring these crime levels down. We need them to stop doing that in order for people to start looking at them different.
How do we do this? How do we bring this down?
Education would be my best thing. We just need to educate them. We need better school systems. We need to educate them. They need to vote in the city officials who care about their neighborhoods and who want to become a part of their neighborhood and not necessarily in control of their neighborhood. Like you were saying with the community policing thing, when the police became a part of their neighborhood and not necessarily the father figure of the neighborhood got better. They need city officials to do the same thing. We need to restructure. We need to vote in people who actually care about the education system. And that way that children like you're talking about can feel like they have a way out, can feel like they don't have to go and do this A, B, and C or crime, 1, 2, or 3. We need to let them know, yes, you most certainly can get the right education to get you into college. You do have that dream. You do have that opportunity. But the only way to do that is to vote in officials who care, because that's the only way it's really going to change. People who are willing to allocate the money that it's going to take to build better schools, buy better books, get newer computers, and really pay the teachers. Another thing is the teachers have given up across the board on a lot of schools and a lot of neighborhoods because the teachers don't make crap. So the teachers aren't making it. I mean, the education system's key. The only way, and I think that's another reason that our education system is faltered in the way that it has, is because our government doesn't really want us smart. So we have to take it into our own hands.
Yeah, they don't want us. They don't want us smart. So, all right. So there's a lot. We're about to wrap up here, but there's a lot of hurdles there. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think there's some stuff maybe we just don't agree upon, and that's all right.
Yeah.
But I think putting it on the citizenry, I think it's fine. Like, people need to take charge and elect officials. But I think for me, then you're talking about you're going to need election reform, because if you got 3 jobs and Tuesday is the only day you can vote, then
I think there should be a voting holiday.
Yes.
A day that everybody gets to take off work, no matter who you are, and you can go and you can vote. And I also think it should be one vote, one person, as opposed to all these super delegates and all of that crap. But that's a national scale, not a local scale. But yeah, I definitely think that if you're going to have a voter ID law, then IDs need to be free so that people can get to them. And DMVs need to be at a place that people can reach them instead of being 4 cities over or like just really far away. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of steps that we can take to make voting easier. We need to get them put into place because we're never going to change any of this. And Black Lives Matter is definitely not helping. I mean, I have talked to so many Black people in general who have seen it to be more divisive than inclusive. And it's not actually helping anything because they're not actually getting anything done. They're just screaming at the top of their lungs, and people aren't really paying that much attention because they don't have a direct plan of action. They don't have a way to make it better. They're just saying, this is a problem, fix it. Well, how do we fix it? And you ask them that, and they have no clue. They're like, I don't know how to fix it. Well, we need to know how to fix it before we can fix it. And unfortunately, right now, it seems like Black people are being unfairly treated by, I would say, the left. And people basically saying, not you personally, but a lot of other people, politicians and stuff, I've heard say, we need to help them. We need to reach out to them. No, we need to educate everyone equally. We need to treat everyone equally. We need to put everyone on an equal playing field. And that's how we're going to get stuff done, is when everyone is equal, everyone can vote, and people are informed about the people they're voting into office. That's where you're going to see the most change, is through education. My opinion.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your opinions on all this.
I thank you for not automatically dismissing everything I was saying.
No, I wouldn't do that. I'm not gonna,
all right.
I don't want to do that. I want to have these discussions, and even if we don't agree, that's all right. I think it's worth talking about, and it's obviously a big mountain to climb, and a lot of stuff needs to be discussed. And everyone, I think one thing that people should take away from this, regardless of whether they agree with either one or both of us, maybe they think we're both idiots, but is to accomplish something, everyone doesn't have to agree about every little thing. Everyone can get together and say, well, we need an education system that's better. We need more jobs. We need more, we need an election system that's fixed. We need all that stuff. We all agree on that, then it's okay. Then we can figure out the best ways to do that. So I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you being a Patreon supporter, and I look forward to our next discussion. Don't forget, folks, go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood, and you too can have conversations like this where we might not necessarily agree. And you're going to put yourself out there in a way, and you're might hear some comments you might not like or enjoy, or people might not agree with you. So if you're willing to do that, I appreciate that. What's that?
I'm expecting it. I was fully aware when I brought this up, the backlash that might come my way. I was expecting it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Arabella. My name is Graham Elwood, and remember, let's make Gotham great again.